Yeah, disaster preparedness. We'll talk about disaster preparedness in this slide. Welcome everyone to the small videos on how to prepare. So, allow me to give you certain picks of disasters and you will understand what we are talking about it. Yes, we are talking about a disaster. Now, what kind of disaster if you can people understand? You see, this is a flood and how do I identify? Because the houses, the homes are inundated with waters. This is a disaster where there's a victim who has been attended for. People have been airlifting it out here. This is a disaster where people are talking about certain victims, taking victims away from disaster sites to medical facilities. Now, this is what setting the stage is all about. It. We need to understand what is disaster. To begin about disaster, we need to identify what are the various types of disaster that comes around it. So we can have a list of natural disaster. Allow me to, and then there is something called man-made disaster. So there are natural, there are artificial. If I may say artificial, it looks very fabricated. It's a man-made disaster. Man-made disaster, any terrorism that has been striking, any viruses that has been spreading, any disease that has been spread because of the negligence of man-made. Any infrastructure that has been built by man which doesn't function optimally. Let's say there's a bridge which has broken down. There is a head-on collision of two superfast trains, if I may say. So these are man-made disaster, and everybody knows about natural disaster. Nevertheless, I will spell all the natural disaster for you. They are earthquake, they are landslide, floods, wildfires, hurricane, severe thunderstorms, tsunamis, tornadoes, winter storms, and whatnot. We're talking about volcanoes, pandemic, nuclear explosions, excessive heat, excessive temperature, in extreme condition, very high temperature, very hot, humid summer, or very low temperature, frigid cold. These are your disaster which we have seen. Now, how do we prepare? Something what we need to go about our family. Choose a safe meeting place and carry the needed medication. Ultimate fact is this what we are looking into it. A safe meeting place and unlimited supply of needed medicines and needed things. If we may say medicines, it can be food and water also. So mitigation is the reduction of loss of life, also of property by lessening the impact of disaster. Any activity that prevents an emergency or reduces the effects of disaster is what the motto of preparedness for disaster is all about it. Now, a disaster strikes, it doesn't strike any individual. When I talk about disaster, it means the scale is magnanimous. It's the community that is been affected. So it makes sense for the community to be prepared for. So we need to identify the key roles and responsibilities, which can lead forward to having a lesser impact of the negative impact of the disaster. Key priorities in lessening the impact of disaster. Critical that all community members take these steps, essential steps to prepare. Effect when the addresses unique attributes of community and engages with the whole community as a whole. Absolutely, the community reacts as a whole because it is in their safeguard, it is in their businesses to get united at the time of diversity. Uh, so that is what we look around here. Apart from community, if I may say so, it's the government responsibilities that needs to understand. Community has a definite role about it, but no one can negate the impact and the role of governments. Government has the responsibility to develop, test, and probably refine the emergency plan. The government has the resources at it beckons. It can allocate resources, it can identify people who can be allocated, it can identify the resource mobilization. The government has various way to impact or mitigate such kind of disaster. Ensure emergency responders, and it need not be first responder. It can be the emergency responders which you may have to help you to elevate the disaster implications. There should be a disaster management team who can help remove the rubbles during an earthquake or provide relief during the floods or tsunamis or evacuate people during tsunamis and tornadoes. Now, these can be done on a large scale by the government and government only. provide resources to protect and assist citizens. The government has the responsibility. You just cannot negate the impact and the effect that the government can have during disaster reduction plan. And the government are only possible to make the community, the local community teams, infrastructure to be in place as for preparedness of disaster. It can have a separate allocation of resources just for meant for disaster. Emergency operation plan assign responsibility to an organization, perhaps even to the individual. Why we're talking about individual? Individual might be the opinion leaders, individual might be the community leaders, individual might be the elected representative of the people. These are the people who might have the resources, or they might be pivotal in allocating resources or probably coordinating the disaster management plans. So set forth lines of authority, describe how people and property needs to be protected, or should I say will be protected. Identify personal equipments, facilities, supplies, and various other resources. People might tell what are supplies. Supplies are not only medicine, supplies are food, supplies are water. People might say, what other resources? Resources might be electricity. Resources might be the fact that the victims have to be airlifted, have to be shifted to medical operation or to a better medical facilities. These are what we are looking into it. The transportation, these are other resources. Yes, definitely personals are qualified medical officers, paramedical officers, equipments, the immediate things that needs to be done for operations and facilities that has been prevalent. Community leaders, did I say about community leaders? Did I say about the opinion leaders? Did I say about the elected representative of the community? They have a responsibility in making the community prepared for some sort of disaster. They can make the community participate in these preparedness plans, participate in local collaborative planning councils, identify, integrate approaches of various government plans, the local government, the provincial government, the federal government, and allocate the resources accordingly, ensure that the facility staffs and the customers are served and everyone is educated and prepared for what is happening and how should they be reacting. So it is the community leaders job to do into it. They should look into the participate in the local collaborative planning council, identify, integrate appropriate resources into government plans, ensure facilities of staffs and customers served are prepared time and again. We'll talk about the public, learn about the community alerts, warnings, evacuation notes, take training, mock drills, participate in the mock drill, practice skills, personal plans, network and help others, give feedback to the community, help understand. When I say feedback, make other people, the other person understand why this is important, how you should go in such kind of eventuality. Basically, sensitize people, give feedback to community, report suspicious activities in case. Now that would be something which is what I say, not only educated community but also aware communities about what is happening within their communities. Volunteer, ask them to volunteer. So that is what the public can do with have a community alert, take trainings, practice skills, network, educate people, give feedback, report suspicious activity, and volunteer. Now, this is what will happen around it. If you look, this is a pic that shows there is an eventualities um, as far as the disaster is concerned. People might have lost their nears and dears one. The whole family might have wiped out. And this you need to understand and be humanitarian in your approach. Uh, be supportive for each other. So these are relatively unexpected, but then they they are they happen. They actually happen. Emergency personnel might be overwhelmed. When I say overwhelmed, they might be emotionally drained altogether. They might not. They themselves might be in shock. seeing the state of affairs. That is needs to be understood. Lives, health, and environments are endangered every now and then. Talking about the infrastructure, talking about the transportation, talking about people or the victims being airlifted or taken from one side to another side. And then there are scenarios where people, they require dire medical attention, but nothing can be done for them. So inability to assess damage accurately is one of those requirements. Ambulance prevented from reaching the survivors. Why? Probably the roads have been cut off altogether. Police prevented from reaching the areas of civil unrest. Why? Because during such kind of events, people might be deprived of, and out of frustration and out of such kind of uh, such kind of, what can I say? People being left at the sort of the Almighty, where they do not know what to do, what is expected. They resort to civil unrest scenarios. They resort to a protest, probably. They resort to unruly behaviors, and that what helps the police from stopping people to reach certain areas. Fire department prevent from getting into the fires. Flow of supplies. When I say flow, it's not only medicine, food, and water is also interrupted. Roads are crossed, closed, impossible. Why? They might be broken off. Absolutely, they might be broken up. And that is what transportation is all about. It. So, inability to assess the damage accurately, ambulance prevented from reaching the survivors, police prevented from reaching these areas of civil unrest, fire departments prevented from getting to the fires, flow of goods is interrupted, roads are closed or are impassable. Impact of infrastructures, damage critical facilities. When I say critical, it might be hospital, it might be fire station, it might be police station, it can be an administrative building unable to function normally. The telecommunication tower might have been usurped, and that is what needs to be understood. Understand the risk of damage from falling debris. Communication system, survivors unable to help from help, call for help. The transportation, the network towers, the mobile towers might malfunction. The power generators might not be working up. Coordination of the service is hampered. Families, friends cannot communicate, and this is only multiplying their sense of despair. Now that needs to be understood time and again. What are we talking about in terms of impacts as in utilities? This is loss of services. What is utilities? Electricity. What is utilities? Communication. What is utilities? Transportation, road infrastructure. So loss of services, increased risk of fire, electrical shock, limited access to fuel pumps that may not work. The gas is not available. Loss of service contact between survivors and service providers. What are we talking about? Water services, medical facilities hampered, inadequate water supplies, which results in notice to boil water and to hamper firefighting capabilities. And that is what we need to go around it. And never underestimate the fact that during the natural disaster, your public health becomes much more vulnerable. There's an increased risk towards the health facilities. Impact of infrastructure, the fuel supplies, the gas, the petrol might not be there. Increased risk of fire explosions from fuel that happen. Risk of asphyxiations, wherein people are unable to breathe, take inhale air altogether, which leads to asphyxiations. Financial services, money machines are not working, or ATMs machine are not working. Banks remain dysfunctional. Credit card system inoperable. Hazards from home fixtures. Now, this is where we are talking about the home, the plumbing, the gas line, the electricity, the fire, everything malfunctions. Everything malfunctions. Nothing is working in proper shape. Why? Because the gas lines have been ruptured. Why? Because there's a damages from the furnitures, fixtures, your rooms, the windows, everything goes helter skelter. The electrical shocks or injuries from displaced appliances, fire from faulty wiring, overload plugs, you name it and we have it. So how do we prepare for disaster? Is knowing the local hazard. Need to have an alert system in place, warning system in place, evacuation route, need to understand what to do in case of disaster. Sheltering plan, very important. We need to go around the sheltering plan. Consider important elements of disaster preparedness. Address specific needs for yourself, for your people, for your family, immediate family, your neighbors. If you can look after a bunch of people and everybody does the same, the whole communities would be sheltered from a major disasters to a certain extent. So you need to know your local hazard, have an early warning system, have a proper evacuation plan, and probably, if possible, a shelter plan. So when disaster strikes, if you are in home, where do you evacuate? Is home the most safest place? Need to understand this. May not be. Is there a shelter in the place? Probably if there's a community center, shelter kind of places, probably go around it. It might be churches, can be your administrative building, it can be school, it can be universities. You need to look at buildings which can accommodate a bulk of people. If you're in office or a work, how do you get home? First and foremost, ensure that your family is safe. Can you get home and how do you get home? What do you have in person in your car? What can you go around it? And most importantly, after wherever you are possibly, if it is home as it is work, you need to have a sheltering places. Sheltering place is the most important part of your disaster preparedness. So sheltering places is sealing a room, probably identifying the most strongest room. The most, when I say most strongest, I should also ensure the word or stress on the safest room. So identify an internal room, stay for the several hours. Can you possibly store supplies? Remember, so it's not a case of store supplies, but also the facilities of your toilets should be available within things. For an extended stay, you should be stocking up piles for a few days to few weeks. Store emergency supplies, have a bathroom, and then there's something called a community shelter. This is basically a 3 day disaster kit. So why 3 days, 72 hours? People might say because that's the longest amount of time before the government intervention can actually come up. So anything and everything can be taken care of within 72 hours by the government, the national government. So shelter provides the most amount of supplies and warmness. Probably the mere fact that all of the people are staying together, there is a bond that creeps in, there is a faith, the people are seeing one another, and that will build confidence for the community to become much more resilient towards the disaster. And these are the points that I've just discussed with you for the preparedness of a disaster. With this, I come to an end of this presentation. Thank you for watching this video till the end.